Good evening. You've just been born into a reasonably respectable Han Chinese family in the year 1871, give or take a dynasty collapse. You're 5 years old. Your family owns a courtyard house somewhere in Shaanxi province. Not wealthy enough to marry into nobility, but definitely well off enough to be concerned about how big your feet are going to get. There are 4 adults invested in your future, 3 kinds of boiled herbs on the stove, and exactly 0 people planning to ask for your opinion about anything. Your brothers are off somewhere studying for exams, or throwing pebbles at pigeons, or being congratulated for existing. You, on the other hand, are the proud recipient of a silk robe, a handful of embroidery lessons, and a set of expectations so quiet they feel like background noise. The courtyard smells like coal smoke and steamed dumplings. There's frost on the stone floor. And you've just been told, very sweetly, to come inside. Tonight, we're taking a slow, quiet walk into one of history's most unsettling beauty standards. And no, it's not Victorian corsets or powdered lead makeup. We're going a little further east, a little deeper in time, and straight into the heart of a very old house where everything looks peaceful, until someone pulls out the silk bandages. If you've ever wondered what it was like to grow up in a world where grace was measured in inches, pain was considered ornamental, and walking was more of a privilege than a right, this one's for you. Before things get too comfortable, go ahead and like the video, only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of softly horrifying history, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I read them all. Usually while lying in bed and contemplating the evolution of household torture. Now, dim the lights. Get under a blanket. Maybe curl up your toes while you still can. And let's go back. Step into the women's quarters. Your days follow a routine. Not rigid, just finely tuned by centuries of low-stakes obedience. You wake up early. Someone wakes you, technically, a servant, or an older cousin, or your mother's voice through a paper wall. Breakfast is kanji, always warm, always bland, and always served with the gentle suggestion that someday, if you're good, you might get married into a family that can afford dried fruit. You're taught to sit with your back straight, your knees tucked, your mouth mostly closed unless someone older is asking a question they already know the answer to. Your brothers go to study the classics. You practice the kind of needlework that no one outside your family will ever see. Sometimes you play in the courtyard. Not the wild kind of play, there's no mud, no shouting, no visible joy. But if you're clever, you can turn a cracked tile or a fallen feather into a small secret game, as long as you look appropriately demure while doing it. There are dolls, of course. But they are for arranging, not playing. There are books, the wrong kind. Morality lessons. Tales about dutiful daughters who sacrificed everything and were later honored with a commemorative bowl. Your favorite stories are the ones you're not supposed to like, the ones with clever girls who run away or ask too many questions. You don't say this out loud. The women around you are mostly silent. They speak in small corrections. Adjust your posture. Fold your hands. Use softer eyes. Everything about being a girl here is performance. The kind that's expected to look natural by the time you're old enough to be traded politely into another household. You don't think of any of this as strange. It's just how things are. You're not unhappy. Not exactly. You're just being shaped. Slowly. Quietly. Like clay that doesn't know it's drying. Everything's red lacquer and low ceilings. The windows are covered in embroidered silk, which does an excellent job of filtering out both light and joy. The room is warm, not cozy warm, but the kind of warm that says something is being prepared and it might involve your cooperation. There's a basin on the floor by the fire, gently steaming like someone's about to steep tea in it, except this blend isn't meant to be sipped. A bundle of herbs floats lazily on the surface, filling the room with that familiar scent of tradition disguised as wellness. You know, the kind of smell that makes you feel like something culturally important is about to happen, but you're not sure whether it's going to involve prayer or pliers. On the table nearby, there's a pair of silk shoes. Red, embroidered, perfectly symmetrical, and small enough to make your doll look like she's overcompensating. They're positioned just so, not too far forward, not too casual, like someone really wants you to notice them, but also wants to pretend you came to that conclusion on your own. You don't ask about them. You don't ask about anything, really, because no one has invited you to participate in this conversation. Your grandmother, seated like a mildly disapproving empress, doesn't glance up. Your mother is busy folding cloth with more focus than she ever gave your bedtime stories. And the third woman, the one who shows up for all important moments but never seems to live here, smells faintly of medicinal wine and resignation, like someone who's accepted her job in this world is to witness things and not flinch. No one's talking. Which, in this room, doesn't mean they've forgotten what to say, it means you're supposed to be paying attention. You're placed on a low stool without explanation, which, by now, feels standard. Your sleeves are rolled up, not for art or cooking or anything exciting, just to keep them dry while whatever's about to happen happens. Someone touches your ankle, and it's oddly gentle, the kind of gentle that means you should probably start worrying, because people rarely handle your body with that much care unless they're about to claim it for something. You're 5 years old. You don't know what's coming. Not really. You don't yet realize that running barefoot across cold stone this morning was an unspoken goodbye party for your mobility. You don't yet understand that going anywhere, doing anything, moving through your own life without a plan, a pause, or a handrail, that's a freedom you're about to misplace. And those shoes on the table? The ones no human foot could possibly slide into unless something drastic and irreversible happened? They're not decorative. They're aspirational. You're not trying them on. You're training for them. And today, congratulations, is your first fitting. Your feet go into the water first. Not dramatically, no splash, no resistance, just two small soles lowered gently into a basin that smells like boiled tree bark and something vaguely floral, like the inside of your grandmother's medicine drawer. The temperature is hotter than you expect. Not scalding, but hot enough that your toes curl automatically, a small act of rebellion your body commits before you've learned not to. The women don't react. They never do. It's like they've all agreed that if no one acknowledges discomfort, it doesn't exist. Your grandmother leans forward slightly. Not enough to offer help, just enough to supervise. Your mother is watching the water, as if she expects it to start glowing. The third woman, let's just call her the designated enforcer at this point, begins unwrapping a roll of bandages, slowly, methodically, like she's folding a flag. No one explains anything, but that's nothing new. In this household, silence is part of the aesthetic. Instructions are implied. Outcomes are assumed. The water softens your skin, which is, apparently, the goal. You're told, with a tone that suggests you should already know this, that soaking is an important part of the process. Like steeping dumplings. Or laundering silk. Or preparing something that needs to become flexible before it can be made useful. You look at the steam. It curls up toward the ceiling like it's trying to leave. You kind of relate. Your feet are removed from the water. You want to ask why everyone is staring at them like they're evaluating a houseplant that may or may not survive the season, but you've already picked up that questions don't go over well in this room. The cloth they use is soft. Smells clean. Has been used before. You don't know how many girls have sat exactly where you are now, ankles wet, eyes wide, body trying very hard to stay still in case moving makes this moment worse. But you suspect it's more than a few. Absolutely, here's that added section, folding in historical context with the same voice and rhythm. The goal is to quietly horrify the listener with facts, while keeping the tone dry, ironic, and immersive, still in second person. But you suspect it's more than a few and you're right. They've been doing this for centuries. The practice started back in the Song dynasty, at least that's the version your grandmother would probably give if you asked. Which you won't, because she doesn't take questions. Supposedly, it all began with an imperial concubine who danced so beautifully on her toes that the emperor decided smaller must be better, and the rest of the country just went with it. It's unclear whether the story is true. What is clear is that once elite women started binding their feet, everyone else felt obligated to follow. Because if there's one thing Chinese history has taught consistently, it's that social mobility is a painful, usually irreversible process, and in this case, that would include your literal bones. Over time, it became less about dancing and more about status. Small feet meant you didn't work in the fields. You didn't run. You didn't carry buckets. You existed purely to be admired from a respectful distance and possibly married off for a moderate land deal. Which is how a thing that began with toe pointing eventually turned into a national beauty standard that ruined millions of lives, while still being considered deeply romantic. Because nothing says elegance like lifelong disability. The bandages are brought closer. Someone folds one over their hand to demonstrate softness, not to reassure you, just to confirm it meets their standards. Because the comfort here isn't really for you. It's for them. They're the ones who have to justify what happens next. Someone says, she'll adjust. It's not clear whether they're talking about your feet, or your expectations. Either way, you don't get a vote. The first wrap doesn't hurt. Not yet. It's warm. Snug. Almost comforting, like when someone tucks in your blanket a little too tight and calls it love. The cloth is thick and faintly herbal. It smells like dried chrysanthemum and something else you can't quite place, but will come to recognize in time. Your mother does the first winding. Slowly. Delicately. As if she's handling something precious. Which, to be fair, she believes she is. She starts near the toes and works her way up, pausing only to adjust the angle of your foot, a slight twist here, a downward tilt there, little corrections that mean nothing to you, but apparently mean everything to your future. You'll thank me, she says. Which is the kind of thing people always say when you definitely won't. Your grandmother watches closely, offering small nods of approval like a building inspector checking the foundation of a new tea house. Occasionally she adds a piece of advice, usually in the form of a proverb. The virtue of a woman lies in obedience. A quiet girl is a beautiful girl. Pain now is honor later. You're not entirely sure how honor is measured, but you're beginning to suspect it has something to do with silence, posture, and how well you fit into shoes that were never designed for human anatomy. By the second winding, your toes start to tingle. Not sharply, more like they're falling asleep. You try to wiggle them, and you can't. Someone notices. That someone smiles. It's working. You ask, finally, what the shoes are for. Your mother answers the way mothers answer when the truth is both obvious and awful, with a soft voice, a long pause, and a sentence that sounds like comfort but lands more like sentencing. They'll help you marry well. And that's the real story. This isn't just about beauty. It's about economics. Foot binding, in its golden age, was 1 part fashion, 1 part virtue signaling, and about 8 parts market strategy. A girl with bound feet was considered more refined, more obedient, and less likely to run off with the neighbor's son, which made her extremely valuable to families who wanted status without risk. The smaller the feet, the better the match. It was matchmaking math, plain and simple. In fact, many matchmakers carried rulers. Literally. And if your feet were over 4 inches? Good luck marrying into anything above modestly unfortunate. By the third winding, your foot begins to throb. It's subtle. Rhythmic. Like your toes are quietly wondering if this is a joke. You're told to stay still. You're told this is normal. You're told the best results come from starting young, before your bones get any ideas about permanence. Your mother mentions that her own feet were bound at 4. Your grandmother adds that she cried once, and only once. The third woman, who still hasn't introduced herself, mutters something about weather changes and old scars. You're not sure who this ritual is really for anymore. But it's clearly not for your comfort. And just when you think it's done, your grandmother leans forward with a final thought, a verse she says her own mother whispered during her first binding. Golden lilies bring a golden future. The smaller the foot, the deeper the love. She says it like it's scripture. No one knows who actually wrote it. Maybe a poet, maybe a drunk uncle, maybe some enterprising matchmaker with a calligraphy set and too much free time. But around here, anything that sounds vaguely poetic gets automatically attributed to Confucius or the ancients, especially if it helps justify doing something absolutely terrible with a straight face. You nod, because nodding is easier than asking what happens if your future isn't golden, or your husband isn't loving, or your feet simply don't cooperate. But of course, none of that matters now. The first binding is complete. And you still haven't been told when, or if, they'll be unwrapped. The next morning, they tell you it's time to stand. Not in the grand ceremonial sense. No drums, no chants, no proud declarations about this being your moment, but with the kind of quiet expectation that tells you this is no longer optional. You've spent the night lying still, ankles wrapped, skin itching beneath layers of fabric soaked in things no one fully explained. Your toes feel like they've been pressed into a mold and left there overnight, like dumplings waiting for the steamer. The bandages are tighter now than you remember, firmer in some places and strangely damp in others, as if the materials are still adjusting to the shape they've been told you're supposed to become. You sit up, legs dangling from the edge of the bed, and instinctively glance around the room. No one is in a rush. No one is watching too closely. This, apparently, is something you're meant to do on your own. You shift your weight forward. The moment your feet touch the ground, you realize something fundamental has changed. Not in a catastrophic way, not with drama or pain sharp enough to scream, but with a quiet, unmistakable wrongness that runs up your legs and settles somewhere in your spine. You stand. Wobble. Recover. Your mother makes a small sound that might be encouragement or might just be breath. Your grandmother nods approvingly, like you've just performed a trick she's seen countless times. And the third woman, who continues to hover somewhere between aunt and unnamed witness, folds her arms in a way that suggests you've passed some unspoken assessment. They tell you to walk. Just across the room and back, a small, ceremonial route, like a cat being paraded through a new home to make sure it bonds with the furniture. You hesitate. Not out of fear, exactly, but because your body no longer feels like a reliable collaborator. You take a step, or something that resembles one, and your knee bends more than it should, your ankle twists inward ever so slightly, and for a second you're not sure which direction gravity is planning to take you. But somehow, miraculously, you stay upright. You take another step. And another. Your gait is stiff, awkward, slightly tilted. You're walking like someone wearing shoes made for an entirely different species, which, in fairness, you are. Everyone looks pleased. You're told it's beautiful. Elegant. Graceful. They call it the lotus gait, delicate, deliberate, the kind of walk that suggests refinement, obedience, and a future full of favorable dowry negotiations. You're not entirely sure what makes this walk any better than walking like a normal person, but apparently the key is that you don't look like you're enjoying it. One of your aunties, the kind who always smells like strong tea and low expectations, once said that girls with the best lotus gait float like petals and never need to raise their voices. You don't feel like a petal. You feel like a table with a missing leg. From the hallway, you hear your brothers. Running. Shouting. Thumping into walls. Their feet are fully functional and entirely unremarkable. No one has ever praised the way they move, or instructed them to slow down, or measured the width of their steps for future marriage potential. You're told that boys should move with energy and freedom. Girls, on the other hand, should move like incense smoke, slow, elegant, and mostly decorative. You reach the other side of the room. Turn. Walk back. You've completed the route. No one claps, but there's a visible sense of satisfaction. Your grandmother offers you a candid hawthorn as if you've passed a test, and your mother smooths your hair with the soft approval of someone who believes she's doing the right thing. You smile, because it's easier than not smiling, and because someone once said that a good wife never frowns unless her husband is dying, and even then, only briefly. You don't know it yet, but this will be the walk they remember. Your first official performance of the new version of you. And while your feet may still be growing, your options have already begun to shrink. You find out about the numbers later. Not all at once, no one hands you a brochure, but slowly, through quiet conversations that weren't meant for your ears and compliments that sound suspiciously like appraisals. There's talk about how refined your gait has become, how obedient your posture is, how well you've adjusted. And always, there's that sideways mention of your foot size, not as a medical concern, not as a health risk, but with the same tone someone might use to discuss the square footage of a prime courtyard house. Small feet, they say, suggest a controlled nature. Small feet mean you've been raised properly. Small feet tell future in-laws that you come from a household where the daughters don't run off, don't speak too freely, and don't take up more space than they are supposed to. Eventually, someone brings out the actual ledger. A real one. Ink, brush, names, and numbers. It belongs to a matchmaker, the kind who visits once or twice a season, usually carrying tea cakes and unsolicited commentary. She doesn't look at you, not directly. Just your feet. She studies your shoes like they're artifacts and asks your mother whether you're progressing. Then she takes out a measuring stick. There is, you learn, an actual sliding scale. 3 inches is ideal. 3.5 is acceptable. For means you'll need to compensate with personality or a slightly better dowry. Anything more than that, and the conversation shifts to whether you might be more useful as a second wife, or perhaps just stay home and embroider forever. You are not told this directly, but you are in the room. And in this culture, listening without being acknowledged is just part of the training. At some point, you begin to understand that your body is no longer entirely yours. It's been entered into circulation. Your name has likely been mentioned in at least 2 tea shops and 1 ancestral temple. You've become a line item in a list of eligible daughters, sortable by virtue, foot size, family status, and whether or not your maternal aunt ever said anything embarrassing at a festival. They tell you this is a good thing. They say it means you're desirable. They explain that a girl who's properly trained can raise her family standing with a single marriage, which is a poetic way of saying your pain has the potential to generate profit. No one uses words like pain, of course. That would be inelegant. Instead, they say things like sacrifice, or duty, or the honor of being chosen. There's a phrase your grandmother likes to use when discussing the old days, usually after half a cup of rice wine and just before launching into a monologue about her own wedding. She says, "A daughter is like fine silk, you raise her carefully, fold her well, and send her off with pride." It sounds lovely, at first. Until you realize that silk is something people buy, unwrap, and never ask to hear from again. Still, everyone nods when she says it. It's considered wisdom. And wisdom, much like your foot measurements, rarely invites contradiction. You're not told where you're going. That's part of the fun. You're simply instructed to dress nicely, sit quietly, and not lean too far in any direction that might wrinkle your outer robe. You are now, it seems, not only a child but also a representative of the family brand. The outing, if it can be called that, is a family visit to a second cousin's courtyard. There's tea, melon seeds, a tray of candied lotus root that no one actually eats, and about 6 women seated in a half circle around a brazier, all of them observing you like they're not observing you. The conversation hums along just above your comprehension level. Domestic affairs, mutual acquaintances, the price of ginger this year, but the glances keep landing in your direction. Not hostile. Just calculating. You're seated on a stool slightly too tall for comfort, with your feet folded beneath layers of fabric that you're now instructed to keep perfectly still. You've been reminded not to fidget, not to adjust your hemline, and certainly not to rub your ankles even if they're tingling like a swarm of bees trapped inside your shoes. You're not here to participate. You're here to demonstrate. No one says the word marriage, of course. That would be premature. You're only 5. But people notice things. How you sit. How you walk. how often you speak and whether your voice sounds like someone's idea of a pleasant future daughter-in-law. At one point, a visiting aunt, someone you've never seen before and may never see again, remarks that you look very refined for your age, and your grandmother beams like she just won a seasonal harvest prize. No one mentions the shoes. But you catch one of the women looking at them anyway, a flicker of the eyes, a purse of the lips, a subtle nod toward your mother that might as well be a signature on a letter of recommendation. No one says it out loud, but the matchmakers are already watching. Quietly. Like bankers tracking interest on something you didn't know was for sale. Later, you hear one of the adults mutter that you're coming along nicely. It's meant as praise. You're not sure what it's referring to, your ability to smile while your feet fall asleep? Your silence? Your willingness to sit still while people evaluate you like a decorative vase that might one day produce sons? You're given a sesame bun and told to eat slowly. Elegantly. In small bites. You do. Because you're learning. Because it's easier. Because if you chew fast, someone might ask whether you're feeling anxious or, heaven forbid, hungry. Meanwhile, the older girls are seated near the window, feet hidden, faces composed. Some of them are already halfway to marriage age. One has the reputation of having perfect posture and very promising toes, a phrase that is both somehow complimentary and deeply unhinged. Another is known for crying during her third binding, and her prospects have apparently suffered ever since. You don't know their names. But you recognize the posture. And the silence. By the time the visit is over, you've barely moved. You've learned nothing new, except that beauty, in this system, looks a lot like stillness, and that being admired feels suspiciously similar to being benched. You're praised for your grace, your composure, your quiet. No one asks if you're comfortable. No one asks if you're proud. They assume you are. Because pride, like pain, is not something you're meant to express. Only endure. There's no official announcement. No whispered countdown. No calendar where someone quietly circles a date and says, "This is when you'll be finished." That's not how it works. The bindings begin, and then they simply don't stop. First it's a few days, then a week, then the seasons start to change and you realize you've forgotten what your feet looked like before they became a daily project. The cloth is removed, inspected, praised, rewrapped, tightened, adjusted, and tied again, each repetition so practiced, so calmly executed, that the ritual begins to feel like hygiene. Something done to maintain order, rather than transform you. And somewhere along the way, you start to forget what it felt like to walk without needing to think about where the pain would land. You stop running. Not because someone tells you to, that stopped being necessary long ago, but because the instinct starts to dull. The part of you that used to bolt across the courtyard after falling laundry or rogue chickens slowly rewrites itself into something more compliant. One morning, you watch a chicken race past the well and you don't follow. Not because you're tired, or sore, or afraid of punishment, but simply because you understand now that the cost of movement isn't always worth the reward. And no one says, "This is permanent." They don't have to. By the time you've realized it, they already assume you have. You still sleep with your feet wrapped. The pain is worse in the morning. You never say this out loud. Complaining would only trigger another round of reassurances, that pain is part of growing, that suffering is temporary, that beauty demands effort, followed by the ever-popular reminder that a well-mannered girl endures in silence. You're told that it will all be worth it when you're married. Which is comforting, until someone mentions that most girls marry between 13 and 16, and occasionally as early as 12, especially if the match is good or the family needs the space. By that math, you're halfway there. Maybe more. Sometimes girls are promised to a family before they even know how to cook. You've seen it happen, a cousin betrothed at 8, a neighbor's daughter engaged by 10 to someone who would mature into handsomeness. The girl didn't look thrilled. But she bowed at the right times, so everyone said she was lucky. You don't know who you're promised to. Or if you're promised yet. But you're old enough now to understand that once you are, no one's going to ask how you feel about it. Your days begin to blur together. Needlework, posture drills, the constant practice of appearing effortless. You become very good at adjusting your face to match the expectations of whoever is speaking to you. Smiling without showing teeth. Sitting without slouching. Nodding just enough to show you're listening, but not so much that you seem eager. You learn how to drink tea without making a sound. You learn how to speak when spoken to, and not too cleverly, or someone will call you sharp in a tone that doesn't sound like a compliment. There are moments of lightness. A sweet bean bun. A cousin's joke whispered behind a fan. An old poem you memorize, even though no one asked you to. But even those feel like borrowed things, small, quiet rebellions in a life that's already been partially scheduled by people who refer to you as she even when you're in the room. And still, the bandages continue. Some days they loosen them slightly. Other days, they tighten them enough to leave an ache that hums all the way up your spine. You try to hide your limp, and they praise your grace. You wince when no one's looking, and someone comments on how refined you've become. There's no end point, no ceremony, no final milestone when someone says, "You've made it." Because in truth, there is no finish line. There is only smaller, quieter, slower, better, and the growing sense that if you want anyone to see your pain, you'll have to disguise it as beauty. They tell you it's time to go out, not far, just a visit, a short stroll, something light to show your progress. You're dressed carefully, wrapped in layers, hair pinned in a way that looks effortless but somehow took 4 people and 3 combs. Your mother smooths your sleeves, your grandmother straightens your collar, and the third woman checks your slippers with the seriousness of someone inspecting cargo before an international voyage. This is not just a walk. This is a presentation. The courtyard outside is flat, familiar, and treacherous. You step onto the stone path, and immediately your body begins a quiet negotiation with gravity. The bindings are fresh, tightened just that morning, and your feet, if they can still be called that, no longer function the way nature intended. The toes are curled beneath, the arch exaggerated and rigid, and your balance, once a reflex, now feels like something you have to remember and recite. You wobble. Not dramatically. Just enough to remind you that every step is conditional. Your knees bend too much. Your heel slides slightly. It's not walking. It's performance art. Your body is doing math it never signed up for, redistributing weight, suppressing natural motion, and calculating how to stay upright without looking like you're trying. Someone steadies you gently, in that graceful way people do when they want to offer help without admitting you need it. No one says, "You nearly fell." They say, "You're still learning." The message is the same. Historically, this was expected. Girls with bound feet didn't just limp, they had to relearn how to walk entirely. Balance was compromised. Gait was shortened. Movement became a sequence of small, cautious shifts in weight rather than strides. The lotus gait, so often praised for its delicacy, was not a natural elegance but the result of permanent physical instability. Researchers studying the skeletal remains of bound-foot women found severe arch deformation and altered tibia angles, evidence of lifelong joint strain, instability, and yes, frequent falls. But in your world, this is not treated as a medical issue. It's aesthetic. You are not taught to walk safely. You are taught to walk beautifully. And beauty, here, means moving like you might fall at any moment, but don't. Because that, apparently, is where grace lives. You walk down the corridor between houses. Slowly. Quietly. Every footstep lands with effort, every shift in direction is a prayer to physics. But you're praised for your poise. A neighbor's aunt remarks that your form is lovely. Someone else notes that your mother must be very proud. You smile, nod, and concentrate on not tipping forward into the fish pond. You're not enjoying the walk. You're enduring it. And that, apparently, is what makes it womanly. Now you're a grown woman, married with children, and your life has been permeated with pain so steadily, so consistently, that it no longer registers as something unusual. It's just there, like humidity, or household noise. Your feet still throb in the mornings. Your gait is careful, your posture elegant, and your body does exactly what it was trained to do, carry the weight of others with silence and grace. Your husband isn't cruel, but he isn't gentle either. He praises your cooking, not your conversation. He mentions your feet only when his mother is present. You were married at 16, maybe 15, depending on which calendar they used, and no one asked if you were ready. You were. At least, that's what they told you. The years pass. You give birth, survive it, give birth again. There are daughters now. 2 of them. One just beginning to toddle, the other still curled up against your side at night like a cat that doesn't know how sharp the world can be. And somewhere between preparing rice and adjusting headscarves, you realize you are supposed to begin binding them soon. That's the expectation. No one tells you directly. They don't have to. Your own mother drops a folded bundle of white cloth on the edge of your sewing basket one afternoon, neatly tied, herbs tucked inside, ready for boiling. She doesn't say anything. Just presses her lips together and waits for you to prove you've learned something from the life she gave you. But you don't pick it up. By now, it's the early 1900s. Reform has begun to ripple outward from the coastal cities, not fast, not evenly, but persistently. You've heard whispers about the Natural Foot Society, about missionaries preaching change, about a government edict that claims foot binding is officially banned. You've also heard that most of those edicts are ignored. In the cities, they say women are unbinding. In the countryside, they say it's dishonorable. The rules haven't changed. But the enforcement is shifting, just enough to create space for doubt. You don't declare anything. There is no confrontation. No public statement. You simply delay. You tell your mother the girl is too young. You tell your husband there's no match yet. You mutter something about illness, about growth, about waiting until after the winter, and then the next winter, and then again. The cloth stays folded. Your daughter keeps walking. And each time she runs across the courtyard, shoes flapping, hair tangled, grinning like she belongs to no one but herself, a part of you tightens, not in fear, but in awe, because she is still free in a way you never were. Other women begin to notice. Some approve quietly. Some disapprove more loudly. A neighbor makes a comment about lazy girls who never learn discipline. Your aunt scolds you in front of the chickens. A matchmaker stops by and leaves unimpressed. You endure all of it. Because you know the truth, your feet were bound with love. Not kindness. Not cruelty. Love. The kind that's shaped by fear and folded into obedience. And you know how long it took you to tell the difference. You look at your daughter, standing on feet that haven't been wrapped, haven't been broken, haven't been turned into symbols. And for the first time, you wonder if love might look different this time, not like sacrifice, but like refusal. Years pass. The pain in your own feet never fully leaves, it's just quieter now, a dull ache tucked between the joints, rising sometimes in cold weather or when you've stood too long grinding rice or chasing a chicken someone left the gate open for. You're used to it. It's part of your silhouette now, like your spine, like your voice, like your shadow on the paper door just before sunrise. Your daughter is taller than you by 11, and faster than you were at 5. She runs everywhere, even when she doesn't need to, especially when she doesn't need to, and every time someone tells her to slow down, she doesn't. You stop trying to explain that a girl's body was once considered a family's resume. She already knows too much and believes none of it. She walks like someone who assumes the world will make room for her, which is both terrifying and, somehow, exactly the point. She knows what you chose not to do. She's old enough now to see it clearly. You've never made a speech, never drawn a line in the dust and declared yourself different. But the truth is there in her steps, in the way she lifts her heel without hesitation, in the way she plants her foot on solid ground and doesn't apologize for the sound. Sometimes your mother still sighs. She says things like it's not how we were raised, or she'll regret this when she's older, and you just nod. You're not arguing. You're finished arguing. The cloth never left the drawer. That was enough. You still sit sometimes with your shoes in your lap, the tiny ones, red and embroidered, the ones they made for you when the pain had finally reshaped your bones into something someone else could be proud of. You don't wear them anymore. You couldn't if you tried. They don't fit the life you live now, and they certainly don't fit your daughter. You keep them not because you miss them, but because they remind you of what it took to choose differently, of how quietly the world can begin to change, one unwrapped foot at a time. And that's the story I'm telling tonight. A life shaped early, slowly, and painfully, not by choice, but by expectation. A mother who knew what the cloth could do, and chose not to pick it up. And a daughter who walked freely because someone else decided that tradition wasn't worth repeating. If you're still awake, I hope this story kept you company. And if you drifted off somewhere between the bindings and the brazier, that's okay too. You didn't miss the ending. You lived through it. Thank you for spending your night here. Sleep well. I'll be here next time, with another story from the quiet corners of history. Written by Clara Finch, because women's stories always deserve a soul.